This is the judgment of the king, the queen mother said with cold eyes. From this day henceforth, the land and all the treasure in it belongs to the royal family. But the land is our inheritance, my king and my queen. The two brothers protested with so much fear in their eyes and voice. Queen Ezinne ignored them and commanded the guards to throw them into the dungeon. In the ancient kingdom of Umunede, young King Agunna reigned with a heavy hand, guided by the iron will of his mother, Queen Mother Ezinne, and the father of his mother, Elder Nwafo. They were the true architects of his rule, shaping his every decision to suit their own ends. Under their influence, Agunna imposed unbearable taxes on his people, demanding a weekly tribute of their hard-earned farm produce. The once thriving land of Umunede was now suffocating under the weight of their greed, its people starving and desperate. One day, King Agunna attended a gathering of kings in a neighboring village. As he and his guards made their way back to the palace, an arrow whistled through the air, landing perilously close to the young king. Alarmed, Agunna turned to see a young hunter standing in the underbrush, his eyes wide with shock. Realizing his mistake, the hunter fled into the dense plantain plantation, eluding the pursuing guards. The guards returned, breathless and empty-handed, reporting that the hunter had vanished. Troubled, Agunna's thoughts lingered on the hunter's features, which stirred something deep within him. As he arrived at the palace, he summoned the Queen Mother Ezinne and Elder Nwafo, recounting the day's events. It was an accident, Agunna explained, but something about the hunter's appearance unsettled me. Ezinne, ever suspicious, questioned him sharply. If it was a mere accident, why do you seem so troubled, my son? Agunna hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his mind. He considered sharing his suspicions but thought better of it, choosing instead to dismiss them both with a wave of his hand. Leave me, I need time to think, he said to them. As they both left the throne room, Agunna found himself alone with his thoughts. The hunter's face haunted him, a puzzle he could not piece together. He knew there was more to this encounter than a simple mistake. The next day, a wave of unrest swept through Umunede as its citizens gathered at the palace gates in protest, chanting, "No more tax, we won't pay. No more tax, we won't pay." The clamor of their voices echoed through the courtyard, a testament to their desperation and defiance. The elders in council, led by Elder Nwafo, they emerged to address the crowd, attempting to pacify them and urging them to return to their homes and continue paying their tax. But the people remained resolute, their chants growing louder. King Agunna, accompanied by his mother, Queen Mother Ezinne, appeared before the crowd. He surveyed the sea of distressed faces below and felt a pang of uncertainty. In a bid to install control, he ordered his guards to gather the protesters and throw them into the dungeon. As the guard moved to obey, the people fell to their knees, begging for mercy. Caught between their pleas and the pressure from his mother and grandfather, Agunna hesitated. He then turned to Elder Nwafo, seeking counsel. Should we relieve these people of their taxes? He asked. Queen Mother Ezinne gave Elder Nwafo a subtle yet unmistakable sign. Then he responded firmly to the king. The people must continue paying their taxes. It is their duty to the crown. Agunna's heart hardened at his grandfather's words. He turned to the people and said, "Go home," he commanded the crowd. "The taxes will continue." Reluctantly, the people dispersed, their hope shattered. The following day, King Agunna sat in the throne room with his mother, discussing the kingdom's affairs. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion as two brothers busted into the throne room, engaged in a heated argument. Agunna demanded an explanation. One brother stepped forward, his voice quivering with frustration. "Your Majesty, my brother has seized the land our father left for both of us. He refuses to share it or allow me access into the land." Agunna turned to his mother, Ezinne, seeking her judgment. She met his gaze with a cold smile. Then she said, "This is the king's judgment. From this day onwards," she declared, "the land shall belong to the royal palace." The two brothers gasped in shock. But that is our inheritance," they protested. Ignoring their pleas, Queen Ezinne continued, "Guards, throw these men into the palace prison immediately." As the guards moved to carry out her orders, Agunna watched, a growing unease gnawing at him. He saw the pain and injustice in the brothers' eyes, and it mirrored the suffering of his people. Yet, under his mother's domineering presence, he felt powerless to act. Days turned into weeks, and the kingdom of Umunede languished under the oppressive rule of King Agunna, guided by the iron fist of his mother and his grandfather. But the young king's heart was a battlefield of doubt and awakening conscience. He could no longer ignore the cries of his people, the injustice wrought in his name, and the hunter's haunting features that had stirred something deep within him. King Agunna sat heavily on his throne one day, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down as much as the crown on his head. His mind churned with the mystery of the hunter and the unrest among his people. The image of the hunter's familiar yet unknown face haunted him. Deep in thought, he turned to his loyal guard, Obinna, who had been with him during that fateful day in the forest. "Obinna," Agunna began, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "What do you make out of that incident with the hunter?" Obinna, standing at attention, pondered for a moment before replying, "Your Majesty, it is as much a mystery to me as it is to you. I cannot fathom why his features struck you so." Agunna sighed deeply, the weight of uncertainty gnawing at him. Obinna, sensing his king's turmoil, offered a suggestion. "Perhaps, Your Majesty, you should seek counsel from Elder Nwafo. He may have insights that could illuminate this mystery." Agunna shook his head firmly. "No, Obinna, I do not trust my grandfather on this matter. He is too entangled in his own ambitions," the king replied. Obinna nodded, then cautiously offered another idea. "What about Mazibe, the late king's flutist and personal assistant? He is known for his wisdom and knowledge of the land's history." Agunna frowned. "No, I do not care for Mazibe. I don't like him. He is a proud and noisy man. Obinna thought for a moment, then suggested, "There is one other person, Your Majesty, the great Ijele, the eyes of the spirit. She is renowned for her wisdom and connection to the spiritual realm." Agunna hesitated, his father's shadow looming large in his mind. "My father never visited nor summoned Ijele. He relied on the counsel of men, not spirits," Agunna replied. "But you are not your father, Your Majesty," Obinna said gently. Agunna considered this, realizing the truth in his guard's words. He was not his father, and the kingdom needed a different kind of leadership, one that could navigate the unknown. With a resolute nod, he made his decision. "Obinna," he said, "go to the shrine of Ijele and summon her to the palace." Obinna bowed deeply and left to carry out the king's command. As he made his way through the palace grounds and into the forest, Agunna felt a strange mix of apprehensive and hope. Consulting Ijele was a step into the unknown. It was a necessary one. That evening, King Agunna convened an urgent meeting with his elders in the council. The room was filled with the low murmur of conversation and the rustling of robes as the elders discussed the kingdom's pressing matters. Suddenly, the air grew thick with a palpable energy, and the great Ijele appeared before them, her presence commanding immediate attention. The room fell silent, and the elders were visibly shaken by her sudden appearance. King Agunna rose from his seat, his voice steady but reverent. "Great Ijele, a woman who sees and hears from the gods themselves, the small meat that fills the mouth, the drops of water that fills the oceans. I greet you, Ijele. Welcome to my palace." Ijele acknowledged the king with a nod. King Agunna, the one whose destiny was carved by the gods themselves. "Thank you, Agunna. I bring a message for you, but it is for your ears only," Ijele said to the king. Respecting her request, Agunna dismissed the gathering of elders. The council members, though curious, spilled out of the room, leaving the king alone with the mystic. Ijele came in with her bag and moved to a bamboo seat, her presence still radiating an aura of ancient wisdom. She looked at the king with piercing eyes and spoke softly. "Agunna, you have a good and humble heart, just like your mother." Agunna was taken aback. "The people think otherwise," he replied, his voice tinged with sadness. "They say I am as wicked as my mother." Ijele smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "That is among the mysteries surrounding you, young king, and it is what I am here to reveal." The king leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean, great Ijele?" Ijele began her story, her voice resonating with the weight of history. King Agunna listened intently, eager to uncover the mysteries of his lineage and the dark secrets of his family's past. So many years ago, in the land of Umunede, there lived a proud and wicked woman named Egodi. She had a daughter named Ezine, who took after her mother in both beauty and character. Egodi also had a young slave named Chicheta. Her father was a slave, and she was born into slavery. Egodi and her daughter maltreated her so badly that every day Chicheta wept and cried in sadness to the gods. to free her. That season, the king of Umunede, King Ezeka, was to pick a bride for himself. According to the tradition, all the maidens of the land would gather at the stream with their water pot filled with water. The king would then choose his bride by drinking from the water pot of the maiden he favored. As the event approached, the maidens prepared themselves, and parents prepared their daughters for that significant occasion. One fateful night, Egodi emerged from her hut and called out for her slave, Chicheta. She was sleeping in the kitchen. She did not hear. Furious, Egodi fetched a bucket full of water and poured it over Chicheta, who jumped up in shock and hurried to answer her. "You are forbidden to call me mother," Egodi snapped. "The gods could never curse my womb by giving me a slave as a child." She spat at Chicheta in disdain and then handed her a basket full of yams and cassava to carry. Egodi woke her daughter Ezinne, and together they embarked on a journey to the shrine of Ijele. As they neared the shrine, Egodi sent Chicheta home, not wanting the slave to witness what would transpire. Egodi and Ezinne continued on alone. When they arrived at the shrine of Ijele, they were greeted by the great Ijele herself. "What is it that you seek?" Ijele asked, her voice echoing with ancient wisdom. Egodi, with a mixture of pride and desperation, replied, "I wish for my daughter to be chosen by the king as the next queen of Umunede." Ijele laughed, a sound that seemed to come out from the depth of earth itself. "You seek to manipulate fate for your own gain?" she said. "But such desires often come with great consequences. Go home and reflect on what you have asked." Egodi, unmoved, pressed on. "I have made sacrifices, mother of the gods, and I demand that my daughter be the one chosen. It is her destiny," she said. Ijele's expression grew stern. "Destiny is not for mortals to command," she warned. "You may leave now before you invoke the wrath of the gods." Reluctantly, Egodi and Ezinne left the shrine, their hearts filled with anger and resentment. They returned home, determined to ensure Ezinne's place as queen by any means necessary. King Ezeka had gone to the stream twice to select a queen that season. Yet, despite the beauty and readiness of their maidens, none appealed to his heart. The elders grew restless, insisting that he must choose a bride to secure the future of Umunede. In the heart of Egodi, a different scene unfolded. Egodi was busy proclaiming her daughter Ezinne as the future queen of Umunede. "You will be the king's bride," she declared, her voice dripping with pride and ambition. Chicheta, the young slave, was busy sweeping the compound when Ezinne called her over. "Kneel before your future queen," Ezinne commanded her. Chicheta, tears welling up in her eyes, obeyed and knelt down before Ezinne. Ezinne went ahead to order her, "Kiss my feet." With tears streaming down her face, Chicheta did as she was told, her heart heavy with sorrow. After Ezinne left the house, her head held high. Chicheta gathered herself and resumed her sweeping after crying. As she walked, she noticed that Ezinne had left her pot of water behind. She tried to alert Egodi, but was harshly hushed and ignored. Determined to help despite the cruelty she endured, Chicheta picked up the pot and ran towards the stream, hoping to catch up with Ezinne. At the stream, Ezinne strutted about, full of herself, drawing the amused and disdainful glances of the other maidens. One of them approached her and called out, "Ezinne, from which pot will the king drink this time?" Only then did Ezinne realize she had forgotten her pot of water at home. Panic gripped her as she saw the king and his guards approaching the stream. King Ezeka with the elders, watching anxiously and waiting at the palace for his return with a queen. He went to the stream in the company of his guards and his most trusted spokesman and flutist, Mazibe. As he began his search among the maidens gathered at the stream, each maiden held her pot of water with hope in her eyes, but none seemed to capture the heart of the king. He walked slowly, his gaze searching for the one who truly appealed to his soul. Just then, Chicheta sneaked into the gathering, trying to remain unseen as she hid behind Ezinne, but the king's sharp eyes caught sight of her immediately. Drawn to her humble presence, he approached Ezinne and asked, "Where have you been all my life? You are the woman of my dreams, the one that appealed to my soul." Ezinne, assuming the king was speaking to her, began to answer. King Ezeka interrupted her and said, "I wasn't referring to you, but to the maiden hiding behind you." As Ezinne turned, she saw Chicheta standing there, her face a mixture of shock and fear. The king smiled gently at Chicheta and asked, "What is your name?" "My name is Chicheta, slave to Egodi," she replied timidly, fear written all over her. "A slave?" The king thundered. "A slave? I thought my father abolished that practice long time ago," he said to the spokesman, who gave him no answer. Then he turned to his flutist, Mazibe, and asked for his royal cup. As Mazibe handed the cup to the king, Ezinne protested, claiming the pot was hers. The king looked at her calmly and asked, "And on whose hand did I find the pot?" He then dipped his cup into Chicheta's pot and drank from it, signifying his choice. Chicheta, overwhelmed and terrified, turned and ran away, disappearing into the trees. Undisturbed, King Ezeka instructed his spokesman Mazibe to sound the gong and announce to the villagers that he had found his queen. The sound of the gong echoed through the air, a call that would change the destiny of Umunede. When King Ezeka returned to the palace, he was filled with happiness. The love for Chicheta's evident in every step he took. His spokesman announced to the gathered elders that the king has chosen a bride. Excitement buzzed through the elders as they speculated whose daughter he had chosen. Elder Nwafo's voice rang. "Who is the lucky maiden?" Elder Nwafo began listing all the names of the maidens present at the stream, but the king interrupted him and said, "Her name is Chicheta, slave to Egodi." "A slave?" The elders were shocked, staring at each other in disbelief. A slave as the queen of Umunede. They could not believe what they heard. Chicheta, terrified of facing Egodi's wrath, had initially run away. However, when she returned, Egodi greeted her with open arms, masking her true feelings with feigned happiness. She told her that she has broken the shackles of slavery from her and she has set her free. Chicheta was presented to the king, adorned in fine jewelries and ornaments, a stark contrast to her humble beginning. Egodi, ever scheming, made Ezinne escort Chicheta to the palace as her maid. The king adored Chicheta, lavishing her with attention and love. to the point of ignoring all other women. One day, Edanwafo approached Ezinne with a sinister plan. He handed her a substance and instructed her, when the palm wine tapper brings the king's wine, pour this into it, then go and lay with the king. Because according to our tradition, any woman who sees the king's nakedness will become his wife. Ezinne succeeded in this evil plot, and Chicheta was heartbroken. But she begged the king to marry Ezinne as the custom and traditions demand. Also, Ezinne was her sister, so she thought. The king, bound by tradition, agreed, and soon both Chicheta and Ezinne became pregnant. As their delivery date approached, Egodi and Edanwafo conspired with the midwives. If the slave girl gives birth to a son, kill her and kill the son. If she gives birth to a girl, she lives, they instructed the midwives. When the day of the delivery arrived, both queens went into labor. Egodi monitored the process closely, while the king and the elders paced restlessly in the palace. A baby's cry pierced the air, and the king's heart leaped. But when he jumped up, he remembered that there are 2 women in labor. He sat down again, praying to the gods for his son to be born from Chicheta. A midwife rushed to Egodi, whispering the news to Egodi. Ezinne gave birth to a girl, but the baby girl died immediately. Chicheta gave birth to twin boys. Egodi's face twisted with malice as she ordered with anger immediately. Take the dead girl to Chicheta and one of the twin babies to Ezinne. As for the remaining twin, eliminate him immediately. The midwife, although fearful, was moved by the sight of the innocent child. She was barren and saw a chance to have a child of her own. Then she grabbed it. Instead of killing the twin, she fled to a distant village and raised the boy as her own son. But back at the palace, the news of the birth reached the king. He was devastated. The only thing he wanted was for his heir to come from the woman he loved, Queen Chicheta. The kingdom mourned the supposed death of the royal princess. But secretly, a new hope grew in the heart of a distant village. Ijelenwa's voice softened, filled with both sorrow and hope. King Agonna, she said to the king, the twin who was spared is your brother, raised far from here. He is also the hunter that you have encountered in the bush. Destiny brought both of you together because it is time to right the wrong that was committed against your real and innocent mother, Queen Chicheta. She has cried endlessly to the gods since your father, late King Ezeka, joined his ancestors, and the gods have decided to clean her tears. After those words, Ijele disappeared. King Agonna pondered deeply on Ijele's revelations throughout the night, unable to find rest. Meanwhile, sensing that something significant had transpired, Edanwafo, suspecting Ijele's influence, decided to take preemptive actions. He sent palace guards to the distant village where he had made his inquiry that the hunter lived with his mother, with orders to eliminate both the hunter and his mother. When the guards arrived, the hunter was not at home, but they carried out the grim task of killing his mother. Upon his return, the hunter found his mother's lifeless body, and he cried as he was heartbroken. The only person he had ever called mother is dead, he said. Later, he learned from the villagers that it was the royal palace guards of Umunede who were responsible for the death of his mother. The following morning, King Agonna awake to find the hunter standing over him, an arrow pointed directly at his heart. Recognizing the hunter from their previous encounter, Agonna was shocked, but tried to remain calm. "How did you get in here?" he said with so much fear. "Why did you send your guards to kill my mother?" the hunter replied, his voice filled with anger and pain. "I never gave such order," Agonna replied earnestly. "Please, I did not order anybody to kill your mother," he insisted. "What is your name?" he asked. "Ikenna," the hunter replied him, lowering his bow slowly. Agonna, understanding the gravity of the situation, invited Ikenna to sit. Meanwhile, Queen Chicheta, still living in the palace in her hut, deserted and lonely, where she cried day and night to the gods, as she continued to suffer under Ezinne's torment. That fateful day, as Ezinne, filled with jealousy and cruelty, as usual, commanded the guards to flog Chicheta, but the guards refused, and saying the gods forbid, thereby invoking the gods' prohibition, they refused to flog the queen. Enraged, Ezinne took the whip herself and was about to strike when King Agonna intervened. "Stop!" he shouted. Startled Ezinne, she paused, confused. "Are you all right?" she asked King Agonna with a mock concern. Agonna replied, quoting a jealous revelation, "If the slave girl gives birth to a son, kill her and kill the son. But if she gives birth to a girl, she lives." The king replied. Ezinne, startled, demanded, "Where did you hear that from, my son?" The king replied, "It was an old saying I learned from a wise woman." Agonna replied enigmatically, sending Ezinne into a state of unease and confusion as she retreated to her hut. The king turned his attention to Chicheta, his heart heavy with sadness as he stared at his mother. At that moment, Mazibe, the late king's spokesman, entered the palace. Agonna called him and instructed him to go to his chambers and keep whatever he saw to himself. Mazibe obeyed. Then he went into the king's chambers. When he came out, he was beaming with smile and happiness. He approached Queen Chicheta and announced to her, "Your days of crying are over. The gods have indeed remembered you, just like your name implies." Then he laughed. For the first time since King Ezeka's death, Mazibe brought out his flute and started playing it, filling the palace with a joyous melody. The spirit of King Ezeka seemed to envelop Agonna immediately. He took Chicheta's hand, saying, "Come and see, mother." Chicheta was shocked that the king called him mother, but she followed him to his chambers, and then they emerged together, Chicheta shedding tears of joy and disbelief. She learned that Agonna was her son, and the hunter Ikenna was also her son. She could not believe what her ears have heard and what her eyes have seen. She only cried tears of joy as the king Agonna and his twin brother hugged her tightly. The three embraced themselves with so much joy. A family reunited at last. King Agonna sent Mazibe to summon all the villagers and the elders to the palace immediately. The assembly was hurried and filled with anticipation. Queen Ezinne and Elder Nwafo were puzzled and anxious, noting the king's boldness in making decisions without their counsel. Ignoring them, Agonna addressed the villagers. There will be no more payments of taxes, my people. The villagers erupted in joy, dancing and celebrating. After the cheers subsided, he continued, my great people of Umunede, no more bringing of your food and your farm produce to the palace. All the land that has been confiscated by the royal household will be returned to all the owners immediately. Elder Nwafo interrupted him and accused the king of madness and drunkenness. But Agonna stood firm. He ordered Mazibe to bring his brother to the palace. The villagers were astonished to see that the king had a twin. Then the king said to the crowd, this is the brother that the enemies of Umunede tried to take away from me, Agonna declared. As the people murmured, Mazibe then brought Queen Chicheta to the throne room, and Agonna announced to the people of Umunede, behold your queen mother, Queen Chicheta. The villagers bow in reverence as the kingmaker took the crown from Ezinne's head and placed it on Chicheta's head as she cried tears of joy. King Agonna then pronounced the judgment. Ezinne, Egodi, and Elder Nwafo are hereby banished from Umunede. If they are ever sighted near our land, they shall be killed immediately. The guards took the three of them away. The people of Umunede rejoiced, their faith in their young king restored. King Agonna, with his family by his side and his kingdom united, vowed to lead with justice, compassion, and the spirit of his mother, Chicheta, ensuring a prosperous future for all the people of Umunede. Indeed, destiny can be delayed, but can never be changed. Also, whosoever God has blessed, none can curse.